I'd like to welcome everyone to this special recodification meeting of the Planning Board of January 19th. At this point, I'd like to take a roll call of members. Ms. Creighton.
Here.
Ms. Delicio.
Here.
Ms. Foley.
Here.
Mr. Gilbert.
Hello.
Mr. Olney.
Here.
And Ms. Tenney, who is currently not here. Okay, I think we have a quorum, and tonight we're going to be discussing the draft zoning bylaw changes. And at this point, I'd like to turn the meeting over to my vice chair, Sarah Creighton.
Lucky me. Thanks everybody for adding another meeting to our busy lives. I was just trying to pull up the agenda, but oh, here's Laura. Okay. Laura's joining us. Hi, Laura.
Welcome.
So we posted this meeting to modify certain sections, to go over certain proposed bylaw changes. And I just wanted to clarify a couple of things first. We still don't know if the April town meeting is going to happen it will happen eventually, but whether it will happen April 4th is unclear. So we're going to proceed as if it is going to happen April 4th. And so we still are under a time crunch to get a public hearing and get that posted, but we're aware of that. Let's not spend time tonight going over that. The other thing that I talked with one of you about is that the documents that are on SharePoint refer to the changes as articles. Now, articles inform the voter about what is to come at town meeting. Alan, correct me if I'm wrong. And then on town meeting floor, you make motions that are the exact text of what happens. So think of the documents in the SharePoint directory as the motions or portions of motions. And then we'd work backwards from there. Articles can be slightly more summary or broader, and public hearing notices can be even more vague. So is that correct, Alan?
That is correct, although there is another issue, which is the text of the zoning amendments that you look at the public hearing and their relationship to what can be included in the warrant and therefore moved at town meeting. It gets there is an issue for all warrant articles for town meeting, which is called the scope of the warrant. Basically it's a due process notice requirement. The warrant has to give reasonable notice to the voters of what's going to be acted on.
Oh, go ahead. Finish.
If the motion at town meeting differs substantially from what is in the warrant article, then I have to rule it out of order. But there's a pretty broad latitude for moderators to decide in their discretion what's within the scope and what's not within the scope. But that's the relationship between those three things: the subject, the text that's considered at the public hearing, the articles in the warrant, and the motion that gets made. Motions that get made on town meeting floor are all somewhat interrelated.
So my point in raising it tonight is that we're starting with the final language, which would hopefully become the motion. That's sort of the way to view those documents. That's the zoning change that we want to see. And not worrying yet about how we'll notify the voters or post a public hearing or that. So just to be clear, I label them all as articles, but they're more accurately, we're trying to get to that final language of a motion, because from that, everything flows. So I just wanted to clarify that. The other thing I wanted to acknowledge, yes, who's
Gary.
Gary.
Oh, Gary has her hand up too. Can the articles be written and published and the text of the motions come afterward, or do they need to be part of what's published?
They do not need to be what's part part of what's published in the warrant. You can include in the warrant what I would consider to be a summary of the changes with highlights. It doesn't have to be the exact text.
Okay, and then another thing quickly, Sarah, before we're done, will we be talking about schedule of events
Not
tonight?
Not tonight.
Um,
Don't think we need to talk about that tonight. And it's not on our agenda. So let's move,
I spoke to Greg earlier and we walked through it. but
Mary,
we'll talk later.
let's not talk about that right now. Let's try to get through the substance of these zoning changes. Mary, you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to understand, because I've been on this process at the beginning and I'm struggling. So where do I look and where do residents look to see the content of the changes? So, you know, with the articles being what they are, what document are we referring to saying, and maybe I'm saying this incorrectly, but the article links to, you know, section 4 in the draft bylaw or links to here. I'm not finding mapping that's going on, so I'm not clear exactly where things are changing and why.
So I know you asked that before. I and Chris and I did our very best to pull out what we thought were the most recent changes that had been vetted and talked about in the many meetings that have preceded this. And in some cases, we were able to put a side-by-side comparison of the old and the new. But in sections 1 through 4, that was, I don't know, beyond my schedule, my skills with Word or my time. So we have not, and that what we know, because we worked on this section 1 through 4, to take an example, in the fall, we made some significant changes from those that were proposed by Mark Bobrowski, making, I think, it better. So no, we don't have a track changes document, and I'm hoping that we have had sufficient work done to be able to be very substantive about what the new changes are that are proposed and to review them critically. If people think that that is a showstopper, then I'll take a motion to not proceed further until we have that. But I think we don't need to do that. It's my opinion, but you guys have been at this longer than I have.
So yeah, and this is by, you know, you and Chris have been doing amazing work. I just need to understand, you know, why definitions were added or changed or taken out, or, you know, why certain wording was changed. I just don't understand where that's happening. And you know, I can reference back to draft 8 with all its flaws, but that's all I've got really, right? Like I have my meeting notes and so I'm just not understanding like where the discussions happened that these things were changed.
So why don't we take them one by one? Because I think each,
Okay.
I think you make, there are some reasons that things changed for each of these. So let's try to get into the meat of it and see what happens.
Sarah, before you do
yes.
that, just one quick comment. I just want to add something to my comment, my response to Gary's question earlier, which is that if the board chooses to submit articles that are really just summaries and highlights of the changes, those articles also need to identify where voters can find the actual text on the website, in hard copy, at the town clerk's office, and other locations.
Yep.
The more people have access to that ahead of time, the better.
For sure. And then to your point, Mary, that we're working with working documents. The public is access to this meeting, and we're going to show those documents here, but we don't have final versions. And just the way we did in the fall town meeting, we will put them for the public to view. Okay. So I mentioned that, you know, I've heard from a couple of you that you've spent a lot of time talking about things and have taken some votes. So I'm going to take things out of order and start right in with the issue, just to reflect this particular issue. There was a vote taken on January 11th, 2021 to adopt. Can you guys see my screen? So let me just make sure. Can you see my screen? Yes, okay. See if I can make it bigger.
Yes, sir, we can see it, but not the text very well. Yeah, if you can zoom in, great.
Okay, is that better? Okay, great. So there was a January 11th, 2021, there was a vote taken and passed 5-1 with one abstention on this article around driveway entrances, which we currently call curb cuts. And it was a subcommittee proposed this exact language, which was voted, and a driveway entrance application. So the important substantive thing here is that it changed the permit to a DPW authority instead of a planning board. This was voted and was never moved to town meeting. So I figured this one was easy because it had already received a vote of the board. And so this was on our shared drive, curb cut. Now, so I would like to know if there's any motion for us to reconsider this particular article, or if we can put this one on the list of things that we would take up at a public hearing and then move to town meeting. So I'll scroll through it for a second. This is amendment to the general bylaws in section, adding, I guess, a section 45. It would also have to be deleted out of the zoning bylaws correspondingly, but this is on the SharePoint as PV3 curb cuts, and it was voted on the 11th of January. I'm hoping we can move this. Yeah.
Could I ask a couple of general questions on this one?
Sure.
So yeah, this was voted through. I'd like to understand the process that we have with, do we need to understand what the DPW process is? Do we need as a board to say, okay, this was in our jurisdictions. Now we feel comfortable that the DPW is taking over and they know what they're doing. And then my second question is, it still becomes a special permit by the planning board in certain instances. So where are we capturing that in any of the planning board items?
Okay. So can I just go to my first question? Sorry, Mary, this is not going to answer your question. Do we need to take this up again? I think Mary's asking some questions, and therefore I'm implying that she would like to take it up again. Others of you have weighed in on this, and I'd like to know whether you think we need to take it up again. I was not here for the lengthy discussions that dated that.
I'd like to move it to a public hearing. I think it's been vetted by subcommittee, and we went through this last year.
Is that a motion, Ron?
Yes, I'd like to move that we move this to a public hearing.
Okay, and then just to clarify, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, and then to clarify, when we move it to a public hearing, we can still address, make changes, get input from the public. Okay, is there any other discussion about whether we should continue to discuss it tonight or whether we should move it to a public hearing? All right, hearing none. Take a vote. Ron?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Laura?
Yes,
Gary?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Christine, is she still on?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. We'll move that to a public hearing. Good. One.
I would just like to note, like, there is something going on, and I believe it was recently taken down, but I'm leaving to go to a ZBA meeting because of 2 ADUs on my street, and someone has applied for a curb cut. It's been sitting in someone's mailbox, no one's answering phones. So I know it has been rectified, but until this is completed, we are still in charge of this. And I just needed to say my 2 cents. There's been a curb cut that someone applied for months ago that no one's acted on. And it's a case of a handicapped child, so I don't know why and who's dropping the ball with.
So let's
But
find, why
maybe-
don't you, Christine, why don't you figure out who it is and maybe we can just get it on the agenda for the 24th.
We have a curb cut coming in on our first meeting in February.
Is it Lincoln Avenue?
Yes,
Sue? Is
Yes.
Sue on?
yes,
Okay,
yes, and there was no application. No one has dropped a ball.
They said that they applied online months ago.
They did not apply online months ago. There's a miscommunication. I have emails to back it all up.
okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for raising that, Christine.
So
Oh.
I don't know.
So
people aren't
let's
checking
stick with
on
our,
it.
let's try to stick with our, getting through our zoning here tonight. So let's jump to the first one on our list that's got substance. And that is sections 1 through 4.4.7. Mary, to your question, this language is what we worked through prior to the fall town meeting. And that is why it does not correspond with the draft 8 Mark Bobrowski changes or with all their flaws, or maybe, so that's one thing. The other thing, so definitions, I think, reflect the definitions that we worked through. We may want to work through some more of those. And so I'm hoping that people have had a chance to look at this again now with some time behind us. And with this also goes the table, which is, we couldn't figure out how to actually put it in Word for this. So the table, and Gary sent that around, and it's on the website, and we have worked through that as well. So I'm going to scroll through this and just as you have comments on the sections that you think we need to kind of discuss, let's, I think I won't see your hand raised, so please just say, I want to talk
Sarah?
about something. Yes.
When we last looked at it, and I think the one on the SharePoint sign includes a bullet about sustainability, resiliency.
I think you're
Is that
right.
on here? Yeah, it's on here. Sorry, I wasn't sure. We were looking at the latest. Thank you.
There it is. So this one here, if you can see can you see my cursor? This was added from the Mark Bobrowski original version. That's what Laura's talking about. So this.
Sarah, I have a
that is-
question.
Yes, go ahead.
Could you tell me the precise name of this document?
Yep, it's the Article PB1. I can't, it's like under
You
my.
can see it in the header up there, Article PB1, sections 1 through 4 on
Okay,
the blue taskbar.
Yep, so you can all open it at the same time if you want. I'm gonna ask that you don't make any changes. I'll have to right now, but we can do editing in real time here. So the first one is purpose. Section 2 is authority. Yes.
2 points of clarification. So the last 2 bullets there, the resiliency one was not in draft 8, just so people know. So that was added at some point. And
I'll clarify. Laura, and we had this added when we had a posted meeting when we met at town hall. And you were at some of those meetings. We added this there.
yes,
one
but
right there.
it wasn't from Bobrowski's document.
Right, that's exactly, I agreed.
So are we, again, I guess for public consumption, are we going to highlight, track change, anything of like what's new compared to our current bylaws?
So let's focus on the content of this language, and then we can talk about how we present it to the public. Because I think that's a separate conversation. So let's try to stick to the content of this document, and then we can talk about the process for public later. But let's write that down. I'm writing it on my agenda to present to public as a discussion. Okay, so we'll put that on kind of a, actually, Laura, could you keep notes of things that we put on the parking lot, so to speak, that we should come back to?
Yes.
Okay, so that's the first is purpose, the second is authority, and the third is scope, and applicability, amendments, and then this gets a little more. This is where I think some changes from the current were tweaked. Changes of boundaries. And so that's section 1. Are there any questions or concerns about section 1? Okay, section 2 are the definitions, and hopefully they reflect the work that we did in those subcommittee meetings at town hall. I think we had 2 or 3 of them. We worked through these definitions in some detail, and there are references here. Oops, sorry. There are references throughout to sections that we need to fill in. So that's clearly, that has to be filled in. Anything that has a section number has to be checked to make sure it coincides with our new zoning numbers. So all section numbers definitely need to be checked. So in reading through this, does anybody have additional definitions? There's one that I'd like to discuss that's a little bit further down.
This is Mary. I don't have additional, but we don't have some definitions in here that are on the use table, and we have some things on the use table that are not in the definitions.
Okay, so we need to cross-reference the definitions with the use table.
Correct. So
Okay.
things like adult entertainment were taken out of definitions but kept on the use. You know, drive-ins and drive-throughs. There's you know, half dozen or so.
Okay, great. So I'm going to make a note here in the document. So that needs to be done. Agreed. Okay, building height. This is an example where that, whatever that section says, we need to check it. Another one that came up recently, let's just keep going. Dwellings. I think we deleted of 100 feet here, didn't we? A rise in grade over the horizontal distance.
Yes, we did. I believe so. Well, 100 feet was to indicate percent. There were like some numbers plugged in before, like 20 feet. So what we were just trying to indicate percent. So it should be, I think,
Well,
1
then
foot
this should
over
be
100.
And this should say percent slope.
Yes.
Does everybody agree with that? Makes sense? Then it becomes
I
percent.
believe so.
Okay. I know this is fascinating, but I don't know anybody has any better ways to do this, let me know. This one, home occupation, we cut that from the bylaw elsewhere and put that inserted in there. That's an example of something that's not in the Bobrowski version. There was a suggestion with regard to the LCD, and I'm going to put it here in red, that we include impervious surface. And I was going to ask Laura, maybe if you could, because you're a landscape architect, deal with this all the day long, that if you could come up with a definition for that. Not necessarily right this second, but
I will.
thanks.
Yep.
Do people agree that that makes sense to include that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, yep.
I'm not sure that, I think that there are, if you think about the Conservation Commission, they have, it's so dependent on the type of material. So I would just make sure that it's a general statement rather than trying to be too descriptive, because, how something is constructed or applied and the type of material, greatly impacts imperviousness of any material. So I think it.
I
as long as
agree
it's
too. I'll
gen-
try to stay
as
away
long as
from
it's general.
materials and
Yeah.
talk more about, I'll look for a quick definition that might suit.
It's more of a performance.
Correct.
Good point.
Thing.
Thank you.
Yep.
Do you want to add pervious surface? Will you have impervious?
That makes sense.
So do I,
That'd be
Laura.
under. I'm sorry, somebody said
Oh, I know, I